Beyond the frame, beyond the story, this is the spirit of the age, captured on canvas. You are watching Zeitgeist Canvas.
The 5 best books that will radically change your perception of art. What comes to mind when you hear art history? Is it that priceless, magnificent work you saw in a museum? What if we told you that the definition of priceless itself is nothing but a historical lie constructed in the 18th century? Or that interpreting a work of art is the greatest disservice to its sensory impact? We have compiled those 5 canonical books that have radically changed our perception, criticism, and even the meaning of the word art. These 5 texts will transform not just what you read, but also the way you see. If you are curious that art is not just about being beautiful, you are in the right place. If you're ready, we're starting at number 5, at the peak of art criticism. 5. Robert Hughes, The Shock of the New. At number 5 on our list, we confront the great chaos of modernism. Robert Hughes and The Shock of the New. Originally born from an 8-part documentary series prepared for the BBC in 1980, this work is a unique resource for an introduction to modern art history thanks to its visual narrative language. Hughes examines how technology affected art and how art responded to societal shocks from the 1880s to the end of World War I. Hughes doesn't just list movements, he is a powerful critic who makes developments in art accessible with his critical intellect. If you are afraid of getting lost in the complex labyrinth of modernism, this work offers you a sharp, dynamic, and visually rich map. However, our questions about art do not end here. We have learned what modern art is, but when did the concept of art itself emerge? At number 4 on the list, we delve into the origin of the word. 4. Larry Scheiner, The Invention of Art, A Cultural History. In The Invention of Art, Larry Scheiner challenges established assumptions by showing that art is not a universal category, but a historical and cultural construct. Scheiner argues that the distinction between art and craft was built on a philosophical, sociological, and class basis in the 18th century. Before the Renaissance, painters and sculptors were mostly seen as craftsmen. The act of creation was evaluated within the process of mastery and making. The book emphasizes that this distinction deepened with modernism, and the creative genius replaced the craftsman. Scheiner analyzes art not just as an aesthetic domain, but also as a cultural and social process. If you want to understand how art became associated with an elitist structure, this work will show you how Western culture constructed its definition of art within a historical matrix. After questioning what art is, it is time to question our relationship with it. 3. Susan Sontag, Against Interpretation. At number 3, we bring a radical objection to art's primary form of communication, which is interpretation. Susan Sontag and Against Interpretation. Sontag's thesis is simple. Contemporary criticism has become obsessed with deciphering content and hidden meaning. Interpretation, ignoring the work's sensory impact and form. According to Sontag, this act of interpretation domesticates and restricts art. It violates the work by reducing it to rational categories. Sontag argues that new criticism should examine what art does, not what it says. In other words, form, not content. She wants us to focus on the surface of a work of art to sharpen our senses and gain a higher level of sensitivity. This call is extremely important for contemporary digital media, where we are constantly exposed to changing images. Stop reading the symbols, enjoy the visual richness of the image. However, this aesthetic experience is not independent of the social context. 2. John Berger, Ways of Seeing. John Berger's Ways of Seeing reveals how ideological our view of art is. Berger's most fundamental argument is this: the act of seeing is not objective. Everything we think, that is, our social assumptions, beauty, social status, etc., affects what we see. This book discusses how post-Renaissance oil painting, especially the depiction of female nudes, has historically operated through ideological concepts such as ownership, social status, and beauty. The book examines how the mass reproduction of the artwork destroys the unique aura of the original work. Understanding ways of seeing allows us to gain a critical distance against the images we constantly reproduce in the digital environment. So, what is the historical ground upon which all these criticisms and theories are built? The starting point of art. 1. E. H. Gombrich, The Story of Art. And the top spot belongs to the work that forms an indispensable foundation for all art disciplines. E. H. Gombrich's The Story of Art. This book is not just a history book, but the most accessible and eye-opening resource for an introduction to the visual arts. Gombrich conveys the complex appreciation of art in a simple and plain language, presenting a long story of creation, starting from prehistoric primitive communities up to the modern understanding of art. The book's success is universal. First published in 1950, the work has sold more than 7 million copies and has been translated into nearly 30 languages. Gombrich's fundamental philosophy focuses on understanding the purpose of art. We can never understand the art of the past unless we know what it was made for. The historical context provided by this canonical work is essential for the critical theories of the other 4 books to rest on a solid foundation. These 5 books have reshaped the art world on the grounds of history, criticism, and theory. Gombrich gives us the history. Shiner questions the concept of art. Berger exposes the way we see, and Sontag invites us to re-experience art. These works will enable you to look with a critical eye not only at the works in the museum, but at every visual image around you. So, do you find Gombrich's starting point or Berger's radical social criticism more striking? Tell us in the comments which of these 5 books you will read first to deepen your visual perception.
You are watching Zeitgeist Canvas.